Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. It is Coach Fury here today, and you will see from the title here that we have a brand new show hitting the channel. It is the CBGM podcast. This is the pilot episode. We don't quite have an actual name for it yet. We don't quite have an actual logo for it yet. We are welcome to hear ideas and thoughts around that. But being a pilot episode, we thought we'd kick it off, discuss a couple of things in the CBGM, which is the Draft Day Sports College Basketball 21 online league. For those of you who've been following my Michigan Let's Play series and Coaches Corners, this is going to be a bit more of a generic podcast around the CBGM, covering the key topics, issues, and bits of news really on a semi-regular basis. And I am joined by a guest presenter today, Coach Kev. Welcome to the channel. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. First, thanks for having me join you in this. I think it's going to be interesting, even if we have some, bumps getting started and stuff. But yeah, like I said, I'm Coach Kevs. I run the Alabama team, Northwestern, and UT Arlington in the CBGM. Yeah, I've made a couple of videos so far, mostly related to Sunbelt. But I'm actually kind of excited to do this podcast with you and take a little broader look at some of the storylines going on, that aren't tied necessarily to a specific conference. So yeah, man, let's get started and have some fun with it.
Absolutely. Let's dive straight in. And I think the best place for us to start with this pilot episode of the CBGM podcast is probably to dive right in and talk about the top 25 poll. It's way too early to kind of discuss this, but it's a podcast and we love to chat about things way too early. So, Coach Kev, I mean, what's the standout teams for you so far after the first couple of games have been played in the regular season?
Yeah, so I got to look at some of the teams ranked in like the top 10. So far, I haven't made my way all the way down the list, but I know the first team I would call out is Villanova. They're ranked number one in the polls right now. I believe that that ranking is deserved. They 4-0. They've got a win over number 17 Pittsburgh. Um, they're loaded, man. They have just an incredible backcourt. They kind of play this small ball style, it looks like, from what I've seen. And I think they are going to give teams fits this year. So
Yeah,
that's kind of the first one that jumped out.
I completely agree with you, Coach Kev. I mean, they are incredibly deep for a team. I mean, they've got some really good seniors that have come back in Mike Cunningham, and the backcourt of seniors. They've got experienced veteran guys who can handle the ball. In Kevin Brunson and David Stevenson, and they've also added obviously some additional really good talent through recruiting last year. So no surprise they're off to 4-0. Jump on the polls and media from 10 to 1. Do you kind of see them being a contender already, given that we've only seen the first set of games?
Yeah, I mean it's still, obviously it's early, but if you look at their roster, I do think they're a contender. I think they're, again, just their depth in the backcourt. That's going to be the storyline for them. I think they can compete with anyone. It'll be interesting to see as they go up against more elite talent. If I'm just pulling up their schedule here, they don't have a lot of premier games really from this point on. In fact, they're not playing any what I would consider like Power Five type team until like the end of December. So assuming that they get through that, I think then things will get really interesting because they play Syracuse, Xavier, Butler, Seton Hall. They got like 5 top 25 type teams in a row once conference play opens up. So it'll be interesting to see, but I do think they're definitely a favorite to win it all. I think they're a really good team.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and then I guess we can probably move on and talk about the team that was projected to be number one overall in North Carolina. Dropped second in the polls despite going 2-0. I mean, we talked, I think, last season all over the chat of how good their recruiting class was last season. And my goodness me, they are just as deep as Villanova.
Yeah, absolutely. Just as deep as Villanova. Starting 3 freshmen. If I'm just looking at my box score, they thrashed my Northwestern Wildcats. Dan McCrae is just an absolute beast. I think he's averaging like close to 30 points a game. They got a really good shooter in Bender. Lenny is a very good inside small forward. Like they're an absolute contender as well. McCrae has so far through 2 games, um, you know, played 100% up to billing in terms of expectations. So
Yeah,
they're going to be a team that I think just gets better as the season goes along, and the young guys get used to running their stuff.
absolutely. I mean, the three freshmen that we've thrown up on the screen here whilst you were talking through there. I mean, Dan McCrae looks like he's a legit top 5 player in terms of pro prospects already. He's fantastic outside shooting, passing is elite. He's a really good rebounder actually, and he's good size. Obviously, we've talked about that to death before, but all round game is really really good. Putting up astronomically good numbers already so far. 27 points per game, 7.5 assists, 5 rebounds, a block, and 1.5 steals. He's not only doing it on the offensive end, he's doing it on the defensive end as well. So he's phenomenal. I think my only question mark I personally have about North Carolina really is just the front court. I mean, it's a minor thing. They just don't have anyone who they can just give the ball in the post and just get it done. That being said, though, I mean their wing positions and guard positions are all exceptional, and I think they're going to really heavily rely on that when it comes to crucial games down the stretch, probably in the national tournament.
Yeah, and again, like I do think they're vulnerable, like any team is, especially earlier in the season. And if you like look at their stats, the 3 freshmen we mentioned, like I'm just looking at their field goal percentage. They're not shooting the ball super efficiently, but they make up for it because they're getting to the free throw line. McCrae is Bender's shooting really well from the outside. Lenny's shooting the web ball well from the free throw line. So they do have some, I'm not going to call them weaknesses, but you can kind of see that they are a little vulnerable against a team like maybe a Villanova or a Michigan State or somebody that can kind of counter them in some degree. Um, but man, I would not put my money against them at this stage just because Dan McCrae and those guys are just so good.
Yeah, I mean it'd be a really interesting test to see how this team does with the freshmen versus Villanova, where they do have some more experienced college players. It'd be interesting to see. They might end up playing each other at some point in the national tournament. Who knows? But it'll be really interesting to see whether that plays out, that extra experience plays out in the game, or whether the freshmen are just as good as some of the more experienced players that Villanova have. So should we move on to another team that I think is worth shouting out about? And we are moving down the poll here, 1, 2, 3, the current poll anyway. But Michigan State, I think, deserves a shout out. They were basically they had a pretty difficult time with the recruiting class this year. In terms of they've only managed to bring in one player at the minute, which is 4-star Chris Shumpert for next season. But on paper, this team is legitimately a really good national title prospect team this year already. And it's kind of the opposite to North Carolina, I think, Coach Kev, in terms of they're not particularly that good at the wing position, but the front court positions, they just have an insane amount of depth there.
Yeah, completely agree with you. I think, where Carolina's a little vulnerable in the front court, Michigan State, like you said, is a little vulnerable in the back court. They don't have any world beaters as like primary ball handlers right now. But if you look at their roster with Myron Chapman and Sharon Graves, like all they really need is somebody to come in the game and basically control the ball and throw it to those guys and defend on the other end. And I would point out, Memphis won a national title last season, built very similarly to Michigan State. Memphis had 2 really stud front court players, and they relied on them heavily, and it ended up taking it all the way on that duo. So I think Michigan State's going to try to sort of ride that same wave and sort of follow that same formula this season. And I think I think they have the chance to do it. It's just can they avoid backcourt injuries at the wrong time and things like that. But in my opinion, they probably do have the strongest front court in the country. Those two are only a piece of it. You got Jeremy Granger. Chanel Humphrey, two really good backup seniors as well. So they're loaded in the front court, man. Probably the deepest front court in the CBGM.
Yeah, I think so. And good observation, Outfield, in comparison to Memphis. I guess one of the interesting things I found about Michigan when I was looking at them just now is that you've got Kareem McCarthy, who is a senior walk-on in the point guard position, who's playing 22 minutes per game. I don't think I've seen, for a team that is possibly a contender, playing a walk-on so much time. It's really interesting to see that he's decided to put his faith in that walk-on versus maybe some of the scholarship players that he's got, that he's in terms of his backcourt. So interesting to see how that plays out. Because McCarthy is definitely a player who, on paper, looks like a really good point guard, but his defense is just atrocious. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out in terms of he seems to be using him off the bench quite heavily in comparison to some of his other sort of guard players for ball handling duties. But that's just, I found that was fascinating. I've not seen that happen for such a high ranking team.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. I just put up their depth chart, and it looks like he's got a freshman shooting guard, Marcus Hughes, starting at the PG position. My guess there is that that's probably just early season playing time move, where maybe he felt confident in some of his early season matchups. The guy's not playing too badly though. He's getting 13 minutes a game, shooting the ball pretty well. But I don't expect Marcus Hughes to be the go-to starter going forward. I think you're right. I think it'll be probably a combination of Brian Cox and Kareem McCarthy, maybe splitting duties there. But again, they don't need a walk-on is interesting. I'm really curious, like you said, to see how that works out.
At the end of the day, Michigan just need a guy to throw the ball into the post and just walk away. They can start walking back down the court if they want. Once they've done that, to be perfectly honest with you, with this team,
exactly.
The bucket's already made usually 9 times out of 10. So it's just interesting that it's just we've got 3 teams who are in this top 3 already. Obviously it's very early, but we've got Villanova with lots of experienced guys coming back, additional depth coming in from recruiting last year. Then you've got Carolina with all these amazing freshmen, and whether they've got the right levels of experience and attitude to be able to win. And then you've got Michigan State, who've just got this really interesting mix of front court, back court challenges, and really lopsided, but just seem to be managing to get it to work so far. It's going to be really interesting to see how those top 3, how they play out, because that top 3 may completely change by next sim. It's so early. We're just throwing it out there, really.
Yeah, for sure.
So, is there any other sort of team, Coach Kev, in terms of the top 25 that sort of stood out for you so far? Either a team that's dropped down or has just jumped early and you just had a little look at them and are maybe interested in what they've got and then what they're bringing to the table this year?
Yeah, I glanced at Duke briefly, and again, I'm trying to get away from the top 5, but for them, they jumped 8 spots. I think top 5 is too high for them right now. I'm trying to pull up the schedule. They do have some decent wins. They beat Buffalo, Utah State, and they got a win over Gonzaga. But after looking at the roster, I don't think they're a top 5 team on paper. Now they have a next game this coming sim against Michigan State. So that's, as far as I know, the first top 5 battle we have this year. I think that's probably the NIT season tip-off championship. My expectation is that they lose that pretty handedly, but if they manage to win, then maybe they prove me wrong. But I just don't see them having the right combination of superstar power and depth. They've got a couple of decent players, but for the most part, I think they're going to be overmatched when they start getting in these games with the Michigan States of the world. So that's one observation.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think they're a team that's probably had a nice little start and a bit of a good result that's kind of bumped them back up a bit. The thing I would say to just counter that for Duke, whilst they don't have the real elite star talent that we talked about the other 3 teams have, they do have an interesting mix of players in the sense that a lot of the players that they utilise and play have, in my opinion, pretty good defensive stats, and not just in terms of the defensive rating, but those who just seen the screen, I kind of flicked through to the miscellaneous stats, which gives you a bit of a snippet of defensive ability on the team. And just to throw it out there, I mean, they've got a whole host of players who are really good at stopping drives and also limiting the number of points allowed per shot faced. And who knows, maybe that defensive ability will save them through when we get to the crucial games. But as you said, it probably will impact them on the offensive side. I don't think they have that type of real elite talent to just go and get them the points they need in some of these games when they are up against much tougher opposition, possibly.
Yeah. Yeah, you may be onto something. They're only giving up 60 points a game through 3 games, and I think they're like, I just looked at like top 50 in defensive rating. So yeah, so you might be right. They may be a little better on that end than I'll give them credit for.
Yeah, I mean they've got a lot of guys. Just to give you flavour, they've got a lot of guys who are in their rotation who are good on-ball defenders, make blocks, make steals, disruptive type of defense. So maybe that's where they're leaning to this year. There'll be a defensive orientated team and just rely on that type of play to really just win them games. The turnovers, the transition type of defense that causes, maybe the plus or minus 10 points that might just save them on the offensive side. I mean, so early to tell, but that just from initial snapshot, that was my observation with Duke.
Another team to sort of point out that I think is going to be really good this year is Maryland. I again, it's another team I had the unfortunate. I was unfortunately had to run into with UT Arlington in our first game, and they put up 110 against us. So not that UT Arlington's very good, but Maryland is another team that if you look at their roster, similar to Villanova, just really good in the backcourt. And they have some pieces in the front court as well. Some of those guys are walk-ons, but I look for Maryland to be a real contender in the Big Ten. I think they have every chance to take the Big Ten title, and I think they're going to be just a high-powered offensive team. They kind of play this small ball. I think their starting power forward is like 6'6", and they're going to look to run and use their guards and get out and try to get shots up. And I think that makes them really dangerous. So they're another team to watch for.
Yeah, Mark Linney scares the living daylights out of me, to be perfectly honest with you. As a Big Ten coach in Michigan, he scares me like no tomorrow. He just, I mean, it's really weird. Mark Linney's an interesting player in the sense that on paper, the points that he's putting up are not really that good so far. Granted, it's 18.5 points per game, 7.5 assists per game, 5 rebounds, 1.5 blocks and 1.1 steal. I mean, it's good, don't get me wrong. But the thing that scares me about him is that he's a player that even with a draw fouls of 54, he still draws fouls so well for a point guard against other teams. He can just foul out so many guys. So he just leads this team, and he led the team last year. Once they managed to crack the rotation last year with Linney and that roster, they just went from being a 7th or 8th team in the Big Ten to basically just winning through and doing fantastically well in the national tournament and beyond. And I'd expect it to carry on going this season. I mean, they've got some really good depth. As you said, they do run small ball quite a lot, but I mean, they can comfortably do that because of the simple fact that if I go to their depth chart again, you can see in terms of who they've got in at centre, they've got the likes of Sean Kenner, who is just a guy who just could basically grab rebounds, steal, block, do all the dirty business in the post on his own, to be perfectly honest with you. They don't need another guy in there, so they can afford to run someone like Geordie Porter in at power forward. Then they can shift down all of the decent guards they've got into position and really, really utilise those skills against complete mismatches on other teams. So it's a fantastic idea and build a roster that he's got there. I'm incredibly jealous that he's got so many decent point guards and I can't find one. but Maryland, yeah, I completely agree. Going to be a Big Ten contender, and certainly going to be up there in the rankings, I think, this year.
Yeah. Yeah, I won't beat it. I'm glad you pointed out the Mark Linney free throw thing. I mean, it's one of those things that you'll you look at him because his shooting splits aren't that great. He only shoots like 38% from the field and maybe high 30s from the 3-point line. But then his efficiency is just so good because he's shooting
Shooting,
80%
yeah,
on 10 or 12 free throws a game,
yeah.
and that really makes a difference. So
Basically, he essentially makes sure he fouls out the opposition point guard every single game. If you have a point guard who can do that, it completely destroys game plans for other teams. If you've got a guy like Mark Linney who can quickly draw three fouls from the opposition point guard, most teams don't have a decent backup point guard yet. So it causes all kinds of complete and utter chaos. And yeah, going to certainly help Maryland this year. So should we move away from the top 25 and dive into the initial week one awards and see who's won the National Player of the Week and the National Freshman of the Week? So should we start with
let's get some individual players.
Yeah, let's start with the National Player of the Week, which is Will Bayer, I believe that's how you say it, from Bingham Young Cougars. Well, I mean, let me just throw his stats at you, Coach Kev. I mean, 33 points per game, 4 assists per game, 5 rebounds, 0.5 of a block, and a steal. I mean, that scoring number is exciting, isn't it? Really, if you're a Bingham coach and you've got him and he's put up those sort of numbers in the first 2 games.
Yeah, for sure. And I've seen some talk about Will in CBGM Discord. I haven't really paid attention to him at this point because I guess I haven't run across BYU with any of my teams or and they're not in my conference. But yeah, just insane numbers. And again, I'm just pulled up his stats. Like he's getting 33 points a game. But he's only shooting 37% from the field. But again, like Mark Linney, he's getting to the foul line. He shoots 85% or 88% last year from the free throw line. Like these 2 guys are just great points about it's not just your field goal percentage numbers too. Like if you got guys that get to the free throw line and convert, like that's big points there. So yeah, he's just killing it right now. Definitely a National Player of the Year candidate or whatever the award is, Norton candidate.
Yeah, Norton candidate, I believe. Yeah, National Player of the Year. I mean, it's not out of the remit of what he did last year. So he averaged 26.5 points per game last year, 42% shooting. Really, really good numbers in terms of free throw attempts as well. So whilst he's not efficient at the moment, the free throws are certainly helping him, and he's getting to the line and doing the job there. But very, very good start for Will Bayer, and I'm sure he'll keep that fairly consistent as the season goes on. And I'm sure we will certainly be talking about him a little bit more as the season continues. I'm sure he'll win many more Players of the Week if he keeps those type of numbers up.
Yeah.
So then we move on to the National Freshman of the Week, which, well, I mean, do we really need to even say this? I mean, it's fairly obvious who the National Freshman of the Week is probably going to be for most of the season, and that is Dan McCrae from North Carolina. You talked a little bit about him earlier, Coach Kev, but I mean, guess what's the thing that you really like about Dan McCrae?
It's gonna sound weird, but I kind of like that he's lived up to the hype. Again, we had him in his first game with Northwestern, and I was, probably naively thinking, all right, well, he's a freshman. They're starting 3 freshmen. We run pretty much exclusively zone at Northwestern. Maybe with the low IQs or low proficiencies, I mean, like maybe we'll have a shot at making the game interesting. And so it's kind of fun to see that did not go as planned at all. And McCrae dropped, a 32 point, 7 rebound, 8 assist stat line against me. And then followed that up against Arizona State with another, 23 point, 7 assist type of game. So I like seeing these guys that have all this hype come in, live up to it. He's definitely putting his stamp on not just a freshman of the year type of run, but you got to put him in contention for player of the year just because he's not just scoring, he's running the team, he's getting rebounds. I'm expecting that he's defending the other team's guards really well. So he's the complete package, man. He's he's good.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, he, in terms of player types, which is an interesting thing to sort of just talk about because we haven't mentioned that actually so far, he is a bucket getter and a playmaker. And I mean, what better things could you want from a point guard? It's someone who can score, get you that crucial bucket, and also make the play that you need to win a game. I mean, for me, the thing that I'm really excited about him is that he is such a good ball handler and scorer. He can kind of do both, and given that he's 6'7", a good height, good weight. I mean, in terms of the pro game, he could play positions 1 to 4. To be perfectly honest with you, from what I'm seeing here, which is just crazy to say that. But in terms of the college game, he could play 1 to 5, which is just absolute madness. And if the North Carolina coach is watching, please just play him, have a go at him for one game, just put him in at every single position, and let's just see what numbers he can put up, because he could be get several triple doubles if he plays multiple positions, and I'd be really interested just to see as a test case to see how that works.
Yeah, I agree with you. To me, he reminds me of like kind of like what LeBron would do if he were in college, in the sense that he's got great size. He's obviously not quite the same weight level as LeBron in this game or whatever, but he's a bucket getter and a playmaker, and that makes it really hard. Even if you have a flexible lineup and you run man and you can kind of switch things around in your terms of like who's guarding him, it really puts a lot of pressure on you, because you put your best defender on MCRAE, and if you do, then you're probably leaving Bender or Lenny open to get you inside or outside, and if you don't, then he's gonna go for 30 against you probably. So Carolina will be a fun team to watch this year. And I'm really curious to see how they do in some of these elite matchups. I'm hoping we can kind of get them matched up with, the Villanovas and Michigan States of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, in terms of a couple of games that are coming up, just to kind of close off this pilot show, we've got an interesting game tonight, Coach Kevin, that Michigan State, the number 3 team, are up against the number 5 team in Duke. So obviously we talked about both of those, saying Michigan looking like a legitimate contender. Duke maybe relying on that defense, possibly won't be as a contender this year, but a good first test for both teams here.
Yep. Yeah, excited about that one. Again, I think Michigan State's definitely the favorite in that one. But the beautiful thing about basketball and sports in general is, like, you don't win games on paper, right? So let's see what Duke has when they get in between the lines.
Absolutely. Let's see what happens in that game, and let's see what happens over the next couple of sims to see how this top 25 shakes out. If we've got any really interesting performers, any teams maybe jumping into that top 25, we'll certainly see how that shapes out, and we'll get a better lay of the land as such over the next couple of sims. Coach Kev, it's been great to have you on for the first pilot show. We'll certainly have you back on for future ones to talk about further news, further action, and further things that have been happening in the CBGM.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. Again, I think these are a lot of fun to jump on. It's a little tough to find schedules that align, but man, I'm looking forward to it. I think everybody's a little more excited about this season, because you at least get a little bit of a taste of your own players coming in and kind of seeing what they can do, and I think the storylines are going to be a lot of fun as the season progresses. So I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And I think we'll just end by saying, if anyone has a good idea for a name for this podcast, please send it my way. And also, if anyone has any good ideas or designs for a possible front logo, we'll certainly take that in mind as well, and try and spice up that front page as we start the next couple of episodes. Coach Kev, best of luck for the next sim, and we'll see what happens with the rest of the CBGM.